Good afternoon, ladies. Good afternoon.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to do our fourth session, and our focus, I'm going to bring that up as we go. So let's get started. Just a few reminders. This session will be recorded, and we may use this for training purposes. We want to make sure that you mute your mic unless you're speaking. Make sure your camera ready, and at any time you can feel free to drop any informational questions in the chat. We're just going to start off with a quote. It takes someone with a vision of the possibility to attain new levels of experience. Someone with the courage to live his dream. So that was a quote I found about being a coach. And for today's agenda, we've got three things we're going to work on. We're going to work on developing student, staff, and leadership teams, assessing mentees, we want to assess our mentees' progress, and we want to develop an e-portfolio. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about developing students, staff, and leadership teams. As MBCT, so our first thing I wanted to sort of throw that out was we have the little graphic at the bottom that we start off as pre-service teachers, novice teachers, then we're professional teachers, and then we have our national board there we're super excited about, and then teacher leadership. So I took that as a national board clip. So before I even get to the next slide, I want you to start thinking about what are we doing as MBCTs, as coaches, as leaders to develop our students? Because I think we all have worked with students or work with students currently. So that's always our area of focus, because we've talked about with instructional coaching, we really want to develop to develop our coaches. We want to develop our coachees so that they will be the best teachers possible. So we talk about that. And for staff, think about all of the staff that you're currently on. What are some things that you have done or you've seen other people do that you really thought this is great to develop the staff? And then let's talk about that leadership team. Start thinking about ways that you as a leader have worked on a team, and what have you done to develop that team, to really get that team going? And now I want to give us a Padlet, and I want us to use our Padlet and start dropping just any idea that comes to mind. As you start thinking about what you've done to develop students, any ideas, just put them down. Brainstorm, use a different bubble, however you want to do it. Anything that you've done to develop any staff that you've worked with, could be your current staff or staff that you've worked with before. And then those leadership teams. What are some of the things that you're doing to develop leadership teams? So we're going to pause here, and I'm going to give everyone an opportunity. You could use your second device if that works for you. And you can definitely scan in. That's one way we can get to our Padlet. And you can also use the link, and I'm going to get Joy. Do you have the link for that, Joy? I sent you an email.
You did send it, but it's a picture. It's not a link.
Got you. Thank you. I'm going to just pause right here for a second and get us to the Padlet. So I'll drop the link. So I have more than one way that we can all see it. Okay, so we're going to look at our Padlet for some of the ideas that we could use. So some of the things that I'm saying, collaborate with okay, it moved a little bit, that's okay. Collaborating with STEM teacher on lesson planning with a new teacher. So we can find our role model teachers, our teachers with experience, and collaborate with them and bring those two teachers together. Professional developments that are geared towards identified needs. So no matter who you're talking about, our students, our staff, our leadership team. We definitely want to know, what do they want to grow? How do they want to grow? What do they want to know more about? So that's one way to do it. Self-assessments and goal setting. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Creating Bitmoji with sped links for clients. So that's one thing that you can do. Is our Bitmojis blew up as soon as we found ourselves in virtual times. We started really being able to develop those Bitmoji classrooms so that our students could use those, and having those links to take them directly to where they want to go is a great way to engage. Develop pathways for leadership. So important, because a lot of times we have teachers who want to do something else. They want to move to a different level. Not everyone wants to leave the school, but they may want to be a grade level chairperson, or they may want to be in charge of a committee of some sort. So having those pathways to show them how to move to a different level. And I know that Shona, I know that you recruited half your school for national board. Like, how many people did you get?
I think Rich, because some people laugh and went to other schools, but I think it was like 14, 15.
Yes. I mean, like literally, like she was like a one-woman campaign for her building, and everyone came in was like, look, she's recruiting me. So we were all like, okay, we definitely know that we have a cohort at her school that will be set up, because she has recruited these teachers who really want to pursue national board because of her encouragement. So just a pathway towards doing something that people sometimes can be scared. So you have to like encourage them and show them that they can make a change, and that they could do, reach higher. Analyzing student samples with a teacher, super important, because we're going to talk with the second part of our workshop today is really talking about those coaching, the cycle, the instructional cycle. So talking about like really having a chance to analyze with. So I want to point out that word with. It wasn't analyze for and tell them what to do. It was analyze with and say to them, let's look at this together and how can we make those changes? So all of these are different ways that we can really get people involved and make changes. I love it. We can develop our students by reflecting on what worked well with them, what motivated them, and what challenged them. Those motivations and challenges, those help them grow. So all of these are things that we are going to do. I didn't have a doubt that we would have an understanding of that. So I'm going to jump back into presentation mode. So online, so one of the things I saw on Twitter that I was like, this makes sense to me, was mind shift. So the idea of some of the things that you could do as a humble leader. So we want to lead in a way that makes our colleagues feel that we are all part of this together. So one thing I saw was raise your hand when it's time to take responsibility. And I think that's so important, because as a leader, the buck stops here with a lot of things. If something doesn't get done, I'm like, Joy just did a huge project that was out of her comfort zone, but she led. I mean, like, she said, oh my God, but she led. She took the initiative and was like, okay, like, so step by step, like she was figuring out what to do. But when something didn't go right, I did see her say like, okay, I forgot to do this, but let me do this now. So being able to stand up and say, I made a mistake, I need to change, I'm going to do something different. I think that's a great mind shift. Bragging on others. We want to give others their shine, because it's not about when you're the leader of a team, if you all you ever say is me, 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 that's not encouraging people. So we want to encourage others, and we want to give them their shine and their chance. Combine passion, drive with humility. So being humble. You can be passionate, but you don't want to run over people. No one wants to work with someone that they feel like is just, taking charge or just driving over them. So having that passion, but still being humble. Courageously learning. That's like my favorite one. That's why I made it bold, because I think it's so important to say when I don't know something, and even more important to be like, now let me learn it. Like it's 100 things I don't know. I'm in this whole big pursuance of getting my ESOL endorsement. So that's like my, yes, I'm going to get it. But I don't know ESOL. Like, I know good instructional strategies, but I realized that knowing the names of them and when to use them, that's not something I'm already familiar with. So getting to the point where I know my know that curriculum and know how to teach that. That's going to be my next thing. And turn conversations towards others. Not, you don't want to be the sage on the stage. You want to give other people an opportunity to participate, learn, and engage. So those were just some humble leadership strategies that I loved. And now we're going to get into the second part of our meeting, which was the impact cycle. So your asynchronous learning was all about the impact cycle. Did you have a chance to do any of it? I just want to check. It was a fast turnaround. Good, good, good. So the impact cycle has 3 stages, and every session we've done a little bit with the impact cycle. So today we're going to dig in deep, and we're going to take some of that asynchronous learning and bring it to the forefront. Let's start off by watching this quick video of Jim Knight.
I think if you want to make a difference, one way to do that is to look at education. And if you wanted to take it to the next level, it would be, how can I help teachers reach more children? How can I help teachers be even more effective? We've gotten to a point where we can do that. I don't want to exaggerate. I mean, every situation brings its own complexities and challenges. But I've never felt more confident that I could teach other people how to get good at helping teachers get better at what they do. Recognizing teachers are already doing a good job, they're already dedicated, but our kids deserve the best, and we have to get good at that. And it's not a little thing, it's really, really important for society, but important for each individual child. The model we've got will make that happen. And it's not very big, it's a short introduction to coaching, but packed with, I think, the things you need to know to be an effective coach. So it tells you how to set goals with teachers, how to identify a teaching practice to use, how to make sure the teacher understands that practice before he or she implements it, how to monitor progress until you hit the goal. And sometimes that means you have to pick a different practice, or it means you have to modify the way you're implementing, but it takes you through a coaching cycle. And I've had the pleasure of working with lots of coaches around the world, and what I find is too often they don't really know what they're supposed to do. And this book says, this is what you do. This is how you go through the cycle. This is how you start, set a goal, hit the goal, and what you need to do, what questions to ask, what strategy to use as a coach to make it happen. If you follow the general structure of what we described, you should make a really important, significant difference in what happens in the classroom. I believe, as George Sheehan said, that we really need to be getting better to feel fulfilled as people. We just can't really be fulfilled unless we're growing and developing and getting better. And getting better is sort of the heart of what we do. And coaching is a way to look at that. And it's not a simple thing to improve, because you have to look honestly at where you are and say, that's not perfect. It's good, but I could be better. And then you need help and you need to work at it. And it's not really an easy thing to admit that there's room for improvement. And coaches are people who facilitate that difficult but really, really important kind of growth.
So I'm just going to pause there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to drop a link in the chat, and we're going to let's take 20 minutes, and we're going to read over the instructional coaching cycle. And then when we come back, we're going to really get into each part of that. Are there any questions?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so we've had a little bit of time to read over the instructional coaching cycle. And now we just want to get into each part of that a little bit more. Let's see if I can get past this section. Okay, so the first section, the first part of this cycle is that we're going to identify. And the big part about this, so our asynchronous learning, we had a chance to see one person and they had the little clips about each part, and then we had a longer video that took you through all of one lap of the cycle with one particular person. So there's several steps, but the first one is that the coach helps the teacher to get a clear picture of reality, and it's often by video recording the teacher's class. Then you have to come up with measurable student goals, that you can look at to see if change is happening, and you can use other data beside the video that may help you to really get an idea of what the students need. So you may include student work, observation, and formal or informal evaluation results. So I just want to talk a little bit about this as far as coaching goes. Can anyone from our asynchronous learning, from the article, from your own personal life, speak a little bit about your experience with identifying this stage right here? Anyone have to do? Come on, tell us a little bit about that.
I think, oh,
Okay, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Dr. Rose. I'll go after you.
I think that I believe that it is very important that when you set goals, you make sure that it is not your goal, but the teacher's goal. I know that as coaches, if there's a video, naturally we will watch it in advance before we have the meeting. And we, based on our own experience, we kind of know what we're going to do, but we don't want to be dictating to the teacher. We want to make it appear that it's coming from the teacher. That's why in the video, he would ask, like, in a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe your own instruction? And it's very important when he said that the video is very impactful, because many times, and I would say this because in the PAR program, here we will be assisting teachers who are doing their job, energetic, and they want to do their work. But sometimes there are teachers who are not at that same space, and they feel like they're doing a great job even if they're not doing a great job. And so the video, watching the video of themselves, kind of gives them a reality check. And that's why we don't even have to say you're doing this or you're doing that. The video itself will be a good evidence to tell them the hard truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of softly ask them, so what do you think? What do you think we should do? Even if we know what should be done, we solicit answers from the teachers so that they own whatever we're going to be doing. And I would like to relate this to a short story. When I was talking to one of my supervisors before, when I was new to this job, and then he asked me, well, how long have you been married? And then he said, if you want your husband to do something and you tell him to do it, does he do it? And then he said, no. He said, that's your husband. And how do you expect your teachers to do something if you tell them to do something? So it has to come from them. And I think that was like a great analogy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Why we need to make the teachers see what they have to do, and we're not dictating them. Although we know it really has to come from them, especially when, the identifying what's the reality, what's the problem and stuff like that. It really has to come from them, because they're adults. They really know. It's probably just like, they're in that space where they think that they're doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
Although, as it was mentioned in the earlier meetings that we had, sometimes there are teachers who don't really know, and that's the only time we kind of jump in and kind of give them some clues
Mm-hmm.
to guide them to go towards that direction. But we still try to avoid, technically, literally saying it. We want it to come from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm just laughing at like 100 ideas that popped in my head from you talking, but you're absolutely right. If you tell someone, if you tell, your partner to do something,
Mhm.
you could get that pushback of, on my time or when I get ready. But if they decide to do something, I think you get that buy-in and it looks a little different. Okay.
Mhm.
What do you? Yes.
I was going to share about the identity part being the most important stage because two reasons. In some situations, like the person thinks they are doing something that they're definitely not.
Exactly.
Or not aware of things that they're doing and they're saying that they're not. So like for example, mostly calling on boys or
Mhm.
the right
Yeah.
side of the classroom. So the use of video in that part helps us to like anchor the discussion in some level of data by the observations of the video. And it also takes away the intention. I intended to do it. No, but what did you do? What's
What
in
did you do?
the So I think that's one. And then the other part of like, especially when I'm working with new teachers who want to change the world in a day,
Mhm.
you have an hour period. You can't change the world in an hour. So what can we do to be effective? Like shrinking that funnel down to be more specific and purposeful on what we're doing. And then later on, we're going to talk about it, but like then ranking the goals, prioritizing what we want to do first. That was it.
And even as a new teacher, when she talked about new teachers, I remember because we talk about data points. What am I watching for? What do I want to see? So as a new teacher, I had a mentor who tallied every time I called on a girl and a boy. And
Mhm.
for the
Yeah.
first 15 minutes of my lesson, I called on nothing but girls. But then by the end of the lesson, it actually balanced out. So we talked about, like in my debrief, which was a great lesson for me as a teacher, she talked about the fact that initially she was really thinking like this was a problem. Like, I'm looking at the first 10 minutes and you've called on nothing but girls. But when it balanced out at the end, it was more of a question for me. So what led, it could guide me. So she was like, why did you call on so many girls at first? Like, what led you to doing that? Because at the end it started to balance out. So you somewhere in the middle, you were able to pick up the amount of boys that you were calling on. What were you thinking? What guided you? And my reflection at the time was I felt like my girls were stronger in that area. So without really thinking about it, I started calling on girls because I felt like they were going to get me where I wanted to go. And then it sort of balanced out, but it made me aware that I was doing that. Because you're not, if you don't have that data or you don't have someone that's pointing out that this is a practice that you've put in place, you don't know why you're doing it and it's not productive. Like you want to be able to, equal out your room. You don't want to only teach to the left. You don't want to only want to teach to the front. You don't want to only call on girls. So I'm like, that's good. So let's go to the second stage and talk a little bit about that. So now what do we learn? So once the teacher and the coach set a goal and they choose a teaching strategy, the teacher must learn how to implement that strategy. For the coach, this means explaining and modeling the teaching strategy. So I'm going to just stop there and say, anyone want to jump in? What can we do with this? Or have you experienced this yourself? Work with teachers to model and explain a strategy to them?
Mhm.
Actually, with a, a seasoned teacher, I did have to do some modeling for her because after she had watched herself on video, that was like a last resort for me, was to video one of her lessons. And after we watched the video, she did say, I want to do these things, but it's hard for me to do it. Can you show me? And although I had modeled for her in the beginning, when I modeled for her the second time, she was more receptive and her notes were more precise and she was more in tune to what I was doing. Whereas the first time I went in and modeled it, she was correcting other students. She was looking around the classroom. She was busy here. And I had to keep saying, excuse me, are you watching? Did you just see that? In the middle of lessons. But once she had seen herself in action. And I went back in and modeled for a second time. I had her attention, and she was, kind of just taking notes on what she could do. So it made the modeling more effective.
And thanks for sharing that. I just want to throw out, because I also experienced that. So I have one strategy that I've picked up is to say to them, while I'm teaching or while I'm modeling for you, this is what you're doing. So that has been helpful, because like you said, I think that it's the idea, like I've had people to start correcting papers, to think that it's going to be like a free opportunity to maybe go to a different class or to heat up their lunch. I mean, just various things. So I have learned to say, okay, I'm going to teach. Here's your checklist. Here's your list of things that I want you to watch me do, so that you can ask me questions, so that you can point out anything you don't understand, so that we can have a conversation when it's over. So I set a purpose for watching me, not just the idea of hoping that because it's a learning environment, hoping that they're going to say like, yes, this is my opportunity to learn. I've learned to be like, no, this is what we're looking for. This is what I need from you. And I think that has been helpful. So I'm just going to pause. Did you want to throw anything out, Dr. Rose, or should we go to the next one?
Just one additional thing regarding modeling. Another alternative is peer observation, or you can also watch a video together on the expectations that you want the novice teacher to understand. And then the other one is in between modeling, you can also co-teach.
Yes. And co-teaching is great. I'm like, co-teaching is a great way to just get us together, so I can sort of also bounce back to you, because one of the videos that we watched, it talked a lot about the idea of you don't want to make your coachee feel like you're belittling them, or that you're taking away their power. So if they're in a classroom, I found that I tend to be my strong area is classroom management. I tend not to have a lot of classroom management behavioral problems. And I had to learn early on that I can't come into your room and and present in a way to make sure students feel like, oh, when she's here, when the lady's here, I need to behave a certain way. But when the lady's not here, I can keep doing X, Y, Z. So that's where that co-teaching comes in great, because I want to make it clear that we're together. We're a team. So it's not just that you can behave a certain way when I'm here. The expectation is that you're going to behave this way at all times.
Now that you mentioned about how the students interpret the relationship of the coach and the teacher, I think it's also important to explain to the students, whether it's the coach or the teacher who explains it, that we're not an administrator. Because sometimes the students feel that, oh, there's, you're an administrator and they have to behave, and then they turn out liking you more, and then they start saying, oh, can you just stay here? All of that stuff. You don't want to get into that.
You definitely don't. And I have absolutely had that to happen. So we've got our learn here. We want those clear explanations of what's going to happen. We want a checklist so we know what we're looking for. We might have to make some modifications. Based on something that happens, we may have to modify our checklist or make those changes, but that's a definite plus. And now we want to get some improvement happening. So instructional coaches monitor how teachers implement the chosen teaching strategy and whether students meet the goal. So as we stated earlier, we want the teachers to say, this is what I want to improve. So they set those goals. We've taken those strategies, we've modeled those strategies, and we've shown them how to work. And then, like Joy said, in her case, you may have someone who's resistant. Or like Shona said, we may have someone who doesn't see this as a negative or as a struggle. They feel positive. Things are definitely, you say, what are you struggling with? And they're like, it's all good. So now we want to see this improvement, and we have modeled and we put things in place. So now we're coming back to them. Like it's coming back to that time we have to throw this back at them. So we want to gather data to see if improvement's happening. We can use our observation data. We want to look at the students' assessments. We want to look at students' work. We want to look at feedback. Okay, so I'm going to pause here again. So anyone have experience with this? What have you seen? What has worked well? What didn't work well? Any examples of this improvement phase of the coaching cycle?
I would say, especially during this part when connecting it to the video as well from our asynchronous work, where I would say Coach Knight, Jim Knight is using a dialogical coaching, and he's asking for a rating. So oftentimes in my feedback form, I embed the rating so that they have that. And then when we meet to discuss it, they already rated themselves, and they're talking about why they rated what they rated, and then what is the lever that's causing that rating to be what it is. One of the other things that I like the question that he used was like, he said, well, what kept you from saying it was a 1? There was a lot of positive things going on. What kept it from a 1? What kept it from a 10? So you're going from both spectrums to center in on the evidence of your precise practice.
And even as a coach, we all have to evaluate ourselves. So like I like to do evaluations for professional developments like this, and give people to say like, hey, this is what I felt like went well. This is what you might want to think about, because I think those things give me an opportunity to grow. And I always self-reflect. Like, you know, that's a part of that national board process we'll never get away from. Like, even when you don't want to self-reflect, you find yourself evaluating, okay, you know what? I could have done this different. I didn't have to use that. I should have stopped earlier. I could have gone longer. Like, it's that immediate response and that immediate feedback. So those are things that we do for ourselves, and we want to embed that in our coachees. We want them to understand this is what we want from you. We want you to grow in this way. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at this video. And I'm going to pause right here because I only want to look at parts of this. This was your video from your asynchronous learning. So what I really want to do is I'm going to grab my my camera, because I want to look at just a few moments of this. And I'm not going to play 0 through 124, but of course you can do that later if you want to. Okay. Of course, you can do that later if you want to. But what I do want to play, let me see if I can find my video, is I want us to explore just a little bit. This was a video from this weekend. So I want us to look at starting at 3:33, and I'm going to let it play to 4:04. So I'm going to pull this over to 3:33, 3 minutes and 33 seconds. I can get it. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Yeah, I see it. Come on. Okay, that's gonna have to be close enough. Let's play it from there for a few seconds.
Or actually in it, because you never know. It's going to be one that's interesting, one that actually applies to you, one where you're kind of just given a packet and read to, and those are the worst. But this, where there's actually feedback going back and forth, and it's centered around me, this is the best.
So
I'm going to pause that. What she talked about at the beginning was that she's going to a professional learning opportunity, and she wanted the idea that the learning opportunity focuses on her it means a lot to her. So I just wanted to sort of bring that up, because we're going to stop at a couple of other places. But the idea of, you know, we as a group, we've been reading a book called The 4 O'Clock Faculty, and in that book, it talks a lot about making that learning personable. We want people to feel like it's learning for me. So we've used that, and I just wanted to bring up the fact that she's saying this learning being about her, being focused on her, is super important, and she really enjoyed that. So we're just going to go to 4:15, and I'm going to go from 4:15 to 5:50 real quick. Excuse me. And we're going to just listen to a part of the coaching cycle and talk about it on the other end. So let me go to 4:15.
So during the identify part, we first off identify a clear picture of current reality. That can happen in lots of ways. I might look at student work. I might gather data if I'm the coach and share the data with the teacher. But the cleanest and most powerful way to do it, I think, is through video. Video record the class, the teacher watches it, I watch it, we get a clear picture of reality, and then we identify what's the change we want to see in the students. And we focus on the students. The reason we focus on the students is if we focus on the teacher, we might try something and implement it to do a good job, but not have it have any impact on kids. And really, it's about what's the positive impact on kids' lives. So we identify a change we want to see. That change could be an attitudinal change, like I want my kids to love to learn. I want my kids to enjoy reading. It could be a behavioral change. Often it's achievement goal, though. An achievement goal is going to usually be around looking at student work, identifying a change we might see. We might have a rubric, which is something like a scale of 1 to 5, and have a list of things on that rubric, or it could be a checklist, just things that should or shouldn't be there. So we identify a change we want to see in the students that we can measure, and then we identify a teaching strategy to help us hit that goal. And so we have a clear picture of current reality. We have a change we want to see. We have a goal, which is that measurable outcome, and then we pick a teaching strategy. Now we work from the book High Impact Instruction, which is a set of teaching practices to help us get from here to there. It could be cooperative learning if we want the kids to be more interactive. It could be teaching expectations at the start of the class. It could be something like the culture of the classroom, the way we ask questions. There are lots of things we could do, but not too many. It's a small number of high yield practices. We think too many leads to innovation overload, and there are so many things sometimes that nothing gets done.
So I just want to pause there for a second. And I want to talk about the fact that we have a small number of practices that will yield a high yield result, and that's really important because we want to choose the right strategy, the right thing, the right practice that's going to get the results that we need. So we definitely want to spend our time there. I'm going to just pause there and just say, I just wanted to bring that back to our earlier discussion because he talked about it can be a change in attitude, behavior, or achievement. Those are the 3 areas. And we talked a little bit about just making sure that the teachers have identified what they want. And then he talked about the checklist. And I love when Shona pointed out that he goes into the idea that we're not going to, if you say it was a 7, why wasn't it a 1? Like, tell me some things that you saw that worked out well. And if you say it's not a 10, what stops it from being a 10 gives you a chance to reflect on what you could do for improvement. So I just like the fact, the way he explained that. And then this was the video, like I said, from this weekend. So I just want to go to one more thing. And I want to go to the last part to look at for this section. Because like I said, we've all had a chance to see the entire video. So I want to go to 20. And before I go, did anyone want to add anything before I go to, I'm going to go to 20 to 2146.
I think it's important what he said that we need to focus on the students, not the teacher, so that the teacher doesn't think it's anything personal.
And I think that when you establish that early, I think you get the results that you want. Like, you don't want to make it seem like I'm attacking you or I'm belittling everything that you do, but we do want them to understand our goal is that these students are going to thrive. And if our students are not growing academically, then we need to make some changes. So that's definitely something that needs to be done. So let me just play this last little part.
We're coaching light if we don't have any students.
Then we are coaching light. We have not put on, we're coaching to be liked. we want you to be our friend, and we want to make your copies, and we want to make sure that you feel snuggly, which of course as coaches we want to give you that positive feedback, but we can't stay there because that's not going to move you academically. Joy, did you want to say something? You were like, yes.
I was just saying that's good. That is good. You don't want to stay there. And that was my struggle, is that, when I first started, that, I was just like, everything is unicorns and confetti. And but then in my mind, I'm like, but this really isn't. But I don't want to hurt your feelings.
And since I don't want to hurt your feelings, I'm just going to ride this unicorn off and go make these copies. So you have to be like, no. You have to be like, no, let's talk about ways that you can improve. So definitely, I'm just going to play this last little clip here for about 2 minutes, and then we will.
Continually going back to the questions and making it happen. So we've gone through the identify phase, and we've identified a goal, and we've identified a strategy to hit the goal. Now we're in the learning phase, and we're going to make sure the teacher knows how to implement that teaching strategy through the use of checklists to describe the practice and modeling so the teacher can see the practice before she has to do it. There are a number of reasons why we do checklists as a part of the process. And I shouldn't say it always has to involve a checklist, but if you can't describe it clearly, the other person's not going to do it. And the checklist is our way of making it explicit out there so we can discuss it. If we can't talk about it objectively, if we can't describe it, they're not going to be able to learn something unless I can describe what it is. But then I want them to internalize it and make it their own. Now, probably the classic work on checklists is Atul Gawande's checklist manifesto. He worked with hospitals around the world. He found that the simple checklist could save thousands of lives, billions of dollars. He just validated our belief that we have to be able to describe it clearly. Modeling has been a part of learning for decades. We just found that teachers said to us, it would help me if I could see this before I have to do it. And then we found over time, using our design research methodology, that there are many ways in which the teacher can see it. They can watch it on video, we can co-teach, I can go in the classroom and show them how to do it. What you're modeling might take the whole period, but I don't want it to be the message is, I'm such a better teacher, watch me teach. It's more like, let me just show you how to do this thing. This is a thing I use. It's not that I'm a great teacher and you're going to watch me take over your class. And yet, it is key that the person sees it before they do it.
And I'm just going to stop there because I think that brings home some of our earlier points as well. The idea that we want to be clear with our expectations. So that checklist, he talked about having those clear goals, being able to really zero in on what's happening. He also talked about that modeling, not taking over the room, but the idea of I'm showing you how to do something. And did you notice the teacher sitting at her desk and she's taking notes and you can see her eyes moving back and forth. So she's sort of looking at the teachers, but it was a great moment of engagement during that learn piece. So she was able to see him do it and implement the strategy. And then it goes on later to talk about how she used this. So I'm just going to pause there and say any questions or feedback from the asynchronous. Come on. Yes, share.
Well, I'm actually want to connect this to some other learning we've done as a community.
Yes.
To the symposium, the NBCT symposium with the keynote speaker when he discussed like the brain research and is doing this checklist with even his daughter washing dishes. Like he went by step and had pictures so she knew what to do. And so it was about modeling, it was the checklist, and his daughter, Frank's daughter, was able to execute the expectations because she had a clear checklist, visuals with models. So,
and we do that a lot with students. I mean, because I know like people that work with younger kids, and I worked with a lot, second grade, a lot of my tenure as a teacher, but I had checklists throughout my classroom. So I had checklists about how my center should look when you finish, and I would post those right on the side of the center to say, all materials back in folders, nothing on the floor. So like some of that stuff was just like that management piece of the materials, but there were other checklists to tell you exactly how to do something. First, I want you to, next, then, last. And then if students were to come over to me for something, I would be like, is everything on the checklist met before I look at this? Because it gave them a guide without having to come to me for everything. It was a way to put something in writing and say to them, you're going to go down your checklist. You're going to sign the bottom, write your name at the bottom of this, telling me that you've done everything on the checklist. And then I'm going to hold you accountable because I've given you a resource to check your work. So if second graders can do it, I know that adults can definitely benefit from going through a checklist. But it's a great way to just monitor it to make sure that you're meeting all those points. Anyone else before we look at this? Was a different person, but he goes through the whole cycle with her as well. So I just put a copy in here so that we could see like the identify stage to get that clear picture of reality, the checklist and modeling to make sure that she could learn what she wanted to learn. And then at the end, he was able to modify it so the strategies work. So I just found an example of the coaching cycle and they wrote out the stages for one particular person. So I included that in our resources. So that's sort of where we are as far as the coaching cycle is concerned. And the last part of what we're going to talk about today is we're going to get into developing an e-portfolio. So your people that you're going to work with, they're going to have to develop an e-portfolio and you're going to be a part of it. So we don't have all of the details right now as to everything that's going to go into an e-portfolio, but I did want to spend just a little bit of time talking about what could go into an e-portfolio. So I'm going to pause here before I even go to the next slide. Can you tell me something that you think should be in there? What can we include in our e-portfolio? Just throw them up.
Goals.
Goals. What else?
Student work samples.
Student work samples. Yes. Come on. What else? What else?
Lesson
Plans.
plans.
Feedback. Reflections. Any kind of graphic organizers that we use with them to plan stuff out.
Articles that we use to them to help them learn the new strategy.
Articles, any videos, because we talked about having them that if we didn't necessarily, there's more than one way to model something. So if we had them to watch a video to see how a strategy works, we can include that video and have them to do some kind of reflection on that.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Did you already say checklists and forms?
Any kind of checklist and forms. If I did, we can't hear it enough because checklists and forms are a way to monitor. So any kind of checklist, if we did a checklist to say this is what we're going to do, we're going to put that as an artifact, and we can talk about how did this work for you. So that reflection piece, I'm going to go back to that MBCT reflection piece, and say, keep in mind that we always want them to have an opportunity to really think about how this worked for you. So not just to summarize. I don't want you to tell me what was in the article. I read the article too. So, so I don't need an update. What I want you to do is I want you to read this article and I want you to tell me, how did it help you improve? How did it help you change? Any ahas, anything that you were just like, no, this is something I don't need to get into, any of that. I'm going to pause right there. For 1 second. And okay, so I'm just going to click back on a little technical difficulty here and jump back in. And I noticed that you guys were saying a few things about the value of a portfolio. Can you see it? It's not showing up yet. I just want to make sure I grab this. I'm going to come back, share screen, try this one more time. All right, I think we're good to go. So tell me, what were you sharing about the value of a portfolio?
We were saying that also with the portfolio listed with all those things we discussed earlier, with videos and checklists, that it's an ongoing reference for the teachers that even when they're not working with us, the learning can continue and that practice can be used continuously throughout.
And that's exactly what we want from these portfolios. So you'll get a little more information as time goes on for things that you must have, but based on the suggestions that we've been talking about when we paused our video for a little while, I want to get back in and say that we definitely want to make sure we have the name of our coachee. We definitely want their names on there, because when we get lots of portfolios coming from lots of sources, it can be easy to forget, like, this is going to go into a pile. So we may want to have like an introductory page where they can tell a little bit about themselves. And then for each entry, you definitely want to put your date and your time for your session so that you can keep track of when you're meeting or what they're doing. You might want to put some notes on their goals. Make sure you have stuff like that in there. Identify which part of the instructional cycle you're in. So are we talking about, is this the identify phase? Where are we? Once you set a new goal, let's write down that new goal. How are we going to meet it? When are we going to meet again? Those kinds of things. So these are some things that could be, along with our discussion, these are some things that we might want to include in our e-portfolio to make sure that we have lots of information collected and a chance to analyze that information. So we've had some good dialogue about the e-portfolio. So we're going to pause here for a second and we're going to read about, this one has some of the information that we've talked a little bit about with the ahas, with the coaching cycle. and it's just a different person talking about it. So we have a different coach reaching out, and she really gets into that. So this is an entry from a blog. So we're going to pause here for a second and talk about that. So we're going to take about, I just want to go to the top because I want to pause us here so we can have a chance to read this, and then we'll come back. So we're just going to do a recap. Is there anyone who wants to share out some final thoughts about the coaching cycle? Yes.
Okay. One of the things I think the article really highlights is Dr. Knight's use of the impact cycle. And in the videos that we had to use for asynchronous, he kept talking about peers go as well. So everything starts with the teacher, and then it goes from there, and you're setting goals and you're constantly reflecting on the goals and then improving the practice, but you're making the decision yourself as the coachee. Also, he talks about the coach being using reflective questions and dialogue, and it's not their expertise, it is the coachee's expertise that we are harnessing and enhancing as we move through the process. So it'll keep going, the cycle continues, because you're going to keep striving for more information and new learning and application. And that is why the cycle is cyclical, because it goes around and learning never stops. And that's what we want as far as national board teachers in the practice period, is to continuously be learners.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's pretty much going to bring us to the end of tonight. You do have additional resources that you could use. Thank you for all your participation. So now I just want to go over our asynchronous learning. So I'm going to go to our participants copy of information, and we're down to day 4. This is our day 4. So on day 4, I just want to point out that we talked about, these are our 3 topics for day 4. Those were our 3 topics for day 4. Make sure you're keeping up with your coaching journal. Gives you a great place to reflect as well, so that you can set goals and you can sort of keep that going for yourself and for your own reflection. And then you have 2 short videos that you're going to watch for asynchronous learning. And these are just TED Talks. So we have a TED Talk, and one of our TED Talk really focuses on millennials, because we have, everyone's in the workplace now. We have 5 generations working together now. And she's a coach, but she also has a millennial for a child. And she really starts to examine, our first video really starts to examine how to coach millennials. And we may have some, once we get our coaches and we get assigned people, we may find that we're working with millennials. So that may be helpful. And then the next TED Talk talks a little bit about leadership coaching, because we've been touching on not only being ourselves instructional leaders or leaders within our building, but we've also been talking about the leaders that we work with. So this will give us an opportunity to get 2 different perspectives on those. And then in your journal, you're going to answer those questions and just reflect and get ready for our final meeting, which will take place on Wednesday. That's going to be our last day of our meeting, and it'll be our chance to wrap up our learning and get ready, hopefully, to meet the people you'll be working with really soon. So I'm just going to pause here to see if there are any questions, and then we can close out. Any questions for me?